honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you. And to quote my good friend Ricky from Philippine Airlines, I'm here to share experience, I'm here to learn. And before I dive into it, folks, some of my slides are a bit wordy. I do apologize. When we go for training, they tell us not to make our slides too wordy. But this is info exchange. So there's a lot of info on the slides. We'll take a bit of time to go through it a little bit, because there's really quite a few things I'd like to share with you. I'd like to begin by telling you a story. I was at home one day on standby duty. Fresh pilots need to be on standby duty. When the phone rang, it got activated to go to work. They were short of co-pilot, so I was asked to go and fly with another captain on a quick trip to a town about 2.5 hours away and back, just a quick daily trip. So there was this town, and the airport's on the other side of a range of mountains. And we usually come over on top of the mountains and descend into the airport. And it's far away up from the mountain, and it's not a steep descent, it's a normal descent into this town, except for this nasty tailwind that used to come on the back of these mountains that used to make our lives a little miserable. So off I went with this friend of mine, and I used to be based near this town, so I was telling him about the expected tailwind of this range of mountains on descent. So we arrived there, and he begins his descent. He's flying the airplane, of course. I'm carrying out support duties. Begins his descent as per normal. Tried to do a good job of it to stay on the profile, but unfortunately the wind was not in his favor. It was quite a bit strong on that day. And the closer we were getting to the airport, the higher he was away from his expected profile. So I made a call saying, looks like you're not getting down fast enough. And so he did his best, changing the mode of automation, increasing the drag of the airplane, trying to get back down onto profile. And he was getting towards profile. He was improving the deviation and getting closer to the required profile for 3-degree and stabilized approach into this town. Unfortunately, the wind wasn't dying down. In fact, it was getting worse. 15, 16, 17 knots of tailwind, just enough to make your life miserable. So at around 5,000 feet, I said, doesn't look like you're going to make it. He says, okay. So he dropped speed brakes, pulled the speed brakes out, started to drop flat, even dropped the gears, trying to increase his rate of descent. And he was getting towards the approach path, improving. The deviation was reducing. But at around 2,000 feet, I said, I thought to myself, no, I don't think he's going to make it. So I said, hey, let's do a quick orbit to the left. There's no traffic around here, it's a quiet airport. And I think we'll be fine in that. But I said, no, Adrian, I think we can do this. I think it's coming together. So, okay, let him go. As we are approaching 1,000 feet, it's still a beautiful, clear day, so, we have our conditions prepared. So I said to him, I leaned over and said, buddy, are you going to go around or am I going to go around? And a few seconds later, he clicked over and off he went. So we carried out the procedure quite well, actually. Thankfully, one of those days that I go around actually was performed well. A nice, beautiful day, joined the circuit, left hand downwind, settled up nicely, flew another nice approach to another safe landing, carried out all our checks, parked the airplane, put the brakes on, and there was an uneasy silence in the cockpit. Then he turns to me and says, I'm really sorry. Knowing that he had possibly brought the airplane close to a difficult situation, but appreciated the fact that I was there to give him the right prompts in order for him to make the right decision. I said, hey, but no problem, safe flight. Everything came out nice and safe, and we're happy. So we had a good flight back home. I flew the cycle home, and it was great. And it was a good flight in the end. But that event always played in my mind, because this was an occasion where we had two captains in the cockpit. But that is not always the case. And so I want to learn the lessons of this experience. So what are the lessons of this experience? Press on like this. Have you all heard that term before? where pilots get into this mode. Pilots are very task-oriented people. They want to get the job done, and so they get locked into this, trying to get the job done in as best way as possible. And sometimes that leads to errors. Yes, the question was asked yesterday, can we fly airplanes? Yes, we can also fly airplanes. But before we became pilots, we were unfortunately human beings. And human beings are prone to making errors. And so we need to manage errors. We've known that this is an issue in our industry for years, and a lot of work has been done, and a lot of work needs to continue to occur for us to address the human element of our industry. Poor decisions? Yes, my dear friend made a poor decision. CRM was definitely an issue, and thankfully in this case, CRM saved the day. The ability for the two guys to communicate, one guy to communicate that information, the other guy to receive that information in the end and carry out the correct decision is what has saved the day. So let's take a look at the ALAR toolkit update from the foundation. This chart is in that toolkit. It's a chart that tells us what are the most frequent causal factors of approach and landing accidents. And the dates on it are from 1980 to 1996, 1995 to 2007. It's not a very good chart. Words are a little small, so let me extract some of the data. The three most frequent causes of approach and landing accidents are, number one, omission of action, inappropriate action. Number two, poor professional judgment, airmanship. And number three, failure of crew and loss management. Boy, did they nail it or what? Absolutely right. That's exactly my experience on that particular day. These were the three factors that could have caused an approach and landing incident or accident, or an unstabilized approach in that particular case. Thankfully, the third item is what saved the day for us on that day. CRM. Here are some more conclusions from the toolkit. Among approach and landing accidents in which information about the pilot flying was known, for multi-person flight crews, the captain was the flying pilot in 69% of the cases. The most frequent causal factor cited was omission of action, inappropriate skills. Action. Failure in CRM was the third most frequent causal factor involved in 34% of approach and landing accidents. We move on a little bit. Some secret accident reports suggest that the first officers can be inappropriately deferential to the action of captains. This was an important factor in the crash of a B-747 aircraft while on approach into the airport at Adana, Guam. And similar cultural dynamics might have been involved in the crash of an A320 while on approach to Bahrain. Let's look at the Bahrain Accident Investigation Board. Again, I do apologize for the wordy slide. The first officer performed his routine role, i.e. of communicating with ATC, reading the checklists, and carrying out the checks. However, he played little effective part in flight deck management. At no stage did he raise any issues with or question the captain's decision, even though the captain performed the non-standard procedures and maneuvers. The non-flying pilot is required to make standard call-outs during the final approach, particularly in respect to any deviations from standard flight path. Although there were a number of deviations from the standard on the final approach, the CVR shows little evidence of the first officer calling out such deviations. This was discussed yesterday and asked yesterday from the floor about the first officer opening up and stating, making the calls required. I didn't want to conclude yesterday in the case we covered some of the material in the slides, but here it is answering the questions that you talked about yesterday. So what's the solution? That's the problem statement. Let's take a look at the CAA Capt 720 document. This is their human factors training document under the subject of communication and interpersonal skills. Good communication practice includes such items as polite assertiveness and participation. In order to improve the communication channels, cultural influence must be taken into account. This is an important factor, especially for us here in Asia. Cultural influence must be taken into account. Polite assertiveness is a skill frequently ignored in communication training, but vital to a healthy cockpit. And just show of hands, how many of you in your organizations conduct some sort of assertive training for your pilots? 1, 2, 3, good. A pilot in command may be open to communication, but temporarily unable to receive and comprehend. And Ricky, you asked this question yesterday about incapacitation and how co-pilots are supposed to react to incapacitation. There's also a case of subtle incapacitation. A pilot can become so honed in on doing the approach and so overloaded with work in trying to reduce the unstableness of the approach that he may not be receiving input from the other guy. So a sort of subtle incapacitation is taking place. So we need to train our co-pilots to recognize that such an event has occurred and to intervene. Let's look at some guidance on assertiveness training. And this is a book on human factors, and I will read. Assertiveness training teaches team members to clearly and directly communicate concerns, ideas, feelings, and needs to other team members. This training allows a less senior member to feel at ease in providing input to more senior team members and teaches a junior team member to present information in a manner that does not humiliate or violate the senior member. It also trains the senior team member to be able to accept input from a team member of lower status without feeling threatened. This training does not try to do away with the authority, but is used to make more sure that critical information for a flight does not go unspoken due to fear of being reprimanded. Assertiveness training can be used in combination with SBT, which stands for Situational Based Training, or what we call a loft or role play. Feedback from role playing and performance practice is more effective in training assertiveness skills rather than by lecture only. And I will demonstrate this shortly. Also, exposing trainees to both positive and negative model displays is effective in achieving the application of skills. This role-playing not only helps junior members in learning to assert themselves, but also makes senior members aware of the costs of not allowing for the concerns and opinions of other team members. So besides training the junior member to be more assertive, we also must not forget to train the senior members to be accepted of assertiveness. It takes two hands to clap. This quote on assertiveness training can be found in a book called Handbook of Aviation Human Factors, written by Wise, Hopkins, and Garland. So that is the solution that we've chosen to adopt in Malaysia Airlines. I will now describe to you how we do assertiveness training in Malaysia Airlines. Our CRM training program is a 3-day program, and the biggest module that we do over the 3 days is the culture module. It takes 3/4 of a day to complete. A big chunk of the culture module is based on studying Gerd Hofstadter's dimensions of culture. Some of you, I'm sure, have heard of Gerd's work. In the 60s, Gerd did a survey of IBM employees around the world, and from that study, from that survey, he's determined these 6, well, he originally determined 4 dimensions of culture, and later he added the number 5 and number 6. And the 6 dimensions of culture are power distance, individualism, masculinity, uncertainty avoidance, pragmatism, and indulgence. We talk about this during training. We then ask our candidates on the training, what is their perception of our culture based on these 6 dimensions? And we then have another module called communication, and part of that module is where we do assertiveness training. So let's take a look at how Malaysia scores in Gerd's survey. These are the results for Malaysia. You will see, look at the first 2 dimensions, power distance and individualism. You can see Malaysia scores quite high on power distance and quite low on individualism. So what is power distance? Power distance is the dimension that deals with the fact that all individuals in societies are not equal. It expresses the attitude of the culture towards these inequalities amongst us. Power distance is defined as the extent to which the less powerful members of institutions and organizations within a country expect and accept that power is distributed unequally. It has to do with the fact that a society's inequality is endorsed by the followers as much as the leaders. And for Malaysia, challenge to leaderships are not well received. Individualism. This fundamental issue addressed by the dimension is the degree of interdependence a society maintains among its members. It has to do with whether people's self-image is defined in terms of I or we. In individualist societies, people are supposed to look after themselves and their direct family only. In collective societies, people belong to in-groups that take care of them in exchange for loyalty. And in the case of Malaysia, loyalty in a collective culture is paramount and overrides most other societal rules and regulations. Now, I don't think it's conclusive that these elements in our society determine the ability of our people in our organization to be assertive or not. But I think it's interesting that this information is shared to our people so they understand. It creates a realization of people of the issues they may be faced with when required to be assertive. Let's take a look at Indonesia. Very similar to Malaysia. Again, high in power distance, low in individuality. This is Singapore. Again, similar. Some differences, no doubt. This is Thailand. Very similar. This is the United States. Did I see the difference? The sudden difference? This is New Zealand. This is a comparison between New Zealand and Malaysia. Again, I don't believe indicative of a problem in assertiveness in our cultures compared to other cultures, but the information is important in developing a realization in the tools that people need to overcome in order to be assertive. We then move on to communication training, where we talk about communication styles, how to handle criticism. We talk about assertiveness. Assertiveness needs to be a win-win solution. Assertiveness needs to be different from being aggressive. We need to teach our boys to be careful. We don't want them to be aggressive pilots. We want them to be assertive pilots. There's a difference, and they need to know the difference. We do an actual role play towards doing assertiveness training. I'll demonstrate that shortly. And finally, we teach what we call them an emergency message. We also include in the training elements of leadership in communication, being receptive to assertive messages. And this is mainly for the senior members of the group. So when it's time to do assertiveness training, what I usually do is in front of the classroom, everybody's sitting in the classroom. I put 2 chairs in front of the classroom, and I sit on this chair on the left, and I pick one of the boys from the classroom. Usually, I've sussed out the class. I pick out a boy that appears to be quiet, sitting by himself, perhaps not as assertive as the other boys in the class. I put him in front. And I start a little scenario. I said, hey, we're going flying today. And this boy is sitting next to me. And I play the part of a dinosaur old chap. I'm from Martin, and the boys in the ADA will tell you it's very difficult for me to do this, but I try my best. I'd be a dinosaur old captain sitting there, and, blurting out commands, not very receptive. Of course, in our industry, I think we have less and less of people like this, but anyway, this is just role play. And I said, okay, young man, give me the descent checklist, please. And then I continue with a bit of a descent briefing and approach briefing. And I say, okay, there is the airport that we're going into, and there's this mountain range in between, and we're in the descent. And as he's doing his briefing, I start by doing this. Okay, young man, and it's a beautiful day today. We won't do an approach, we'll just do a visual approach. I know this area quite well, and so we won't brief for an instrument approach, it'll just be a nice visual approach because it's a nice smooth day, and I know this area quite well. So at this point, I can see the young man beginning to fidget a little bit in his chair. The boys in the class are moving around a little bit, especially the young boys, and they're whispering, hey, maybe you need to do something. Okay? And sometimes the boy reacts fairly quickly, sometimes it takes a little bit more to convince him to begin to react. And I'll start asking questions, okay, young man, are you married? And he will say, yes, Captain, I'm married. I've been married 2 years. Any children? Yes, Captain, 3 months ago, I got my first baby daughter. I'm making this up, of course. Ah, well done, young man. Oh, this nasty thing making noise in the cockpit really bothers him, isn't it? And he will begin to say something, I'll distract him again. Totally not reacting to the warnings in the cockpit. And you can begin to see him really fidgeting now. The boys in the back are saying, do something, just sit there. And 9 times out of 10, he will finally open up and say, Captain, the JPWS is making noise. We are approaching this mountain. We need to go around. And of course, then I will activate. But ever so often, one out of 10 times, the guy sometimes is not able to break out of this mode that he's in and make this call. And that's when I'll turn to him and say earnestly, do something. And that brings him to do something. And that brings her. And the rest of the class is, of course, observing this altercation going on between him and me. And then I have a heart-to-heart talk to him. I make eye contact, I look at him straight in the face, I say, you have to understand, when you're in a position like this, you have to act. And you have to act immediately. You have to act the first time the warning appears in the cockpit. There's no point in you being polite and then your daughter having to grow up without her father. Do you understand that you, in this kind of a position, you have to act and correct me? And he will look at me with a serious look on his face and nod his head. And then the rest of the time, the rest of the class is watching this process take place. And I immediately stop the exercise and we break, go for a break, go for a coffee break. I keep that look of seriousness on my face because the message has been sent through. And at the same time, the captains are watching too. So the captains are learning about what it takes for a co-pilot to break out of that. Our polite Asian society of respecting elders and not questioning our superiors and making the call that he needs to make. And the captains learn that they have to set up the environment in the cockpit in the first place to allow these boys to act when they need to act. And that is how we teach assertiveness. Of course, it's a much longer exercise than I've demonstrated here, but that's how we do it in Malaysia Airlines. I will suggest some further reading. Of course, there's a Capt 720 document from the CAA. Active Digest number 2. Do a search of assertiveness on Skyberry. There's some guidance material on Skyberry. There's also a very good article called Assert Yourself by Lida Waffelman. Frank will be able to tell you that. It's available on the Flight Safety Foundation website. It's called Assert Yourself. So in summary, folks, CRM failure is a frequent ALAR causal factor. We need to recognize that. Our Asian culture must be understood and must be taught to our Asian co-pilots, Asian captains, so that they understand the barriers that they have to overcome in order to display the correct behavior in the cockpit. Communication training is important. And under communication training, there should be a strong element of assertiveness. It should include assertiveness communication, how to be receptive to assertiveness. Role play and situation-based training is extremely powerful. In fact, if you stick to just lectures, I think you may not get the message through. You need to create some sort of environment, some sort of a role play that displays the worst behavior in our industry. And I have to tell you, we don't really have many of these dinosaurs left in our cockpits. I don't think so. And the young boys today are certainly different from the young boys that it was when we were co-pilots. I think culture is changing across all the countries, and the young boys seem to be find it easy to be more assertive today than it was just 20 years ago. And finally, the emergency message, and we teach this in Malaysia Airlines to both captains and co-pilots. If you're trying to get through to a captain and he is not responding, your absolutely final attempt will be this. You will say, "Captain, you must listen." And then state your concern. Co-pilots know this, and captains know this. And captains know when they hear these words that the co-pilot is extremely distressed and he's giving you important information which you need to address immediately. These are policies in the books which the boys are aware of. Finally, there's a lot of guidance material out there. Please take a look at it. From the Flight Safety Foundation, the Civil Aviation Authority, the FAA, Skybramy, and etc. I will say, folks, this ALAR toolkit, I believe, is probably the best piece of guidance on safety in our industry. It's been around for a long time, and as Jim mentioned, a whole bunch of these CDs have been handed out, thousands of these, and a lot of them are sitting at the bottom of somebody's desk, on some shelf somewhere, or buried at the bottom of your hard drive. Folks, I challenge you all, open it up, take a good look inside. There's a tremendous amount of very valuable information on this kit. Use this kit in your organizations. It's extremely powerful. The foundation doesn't get enough credit for the value of this, and I would say, gentlemen, I think we should give them a big hand of applause. You guys have done a great job. Now, our challenge now to make sure we make good use of this. This, for me, is the best aviation safety journal out there. There's always one or two copies in my flight bag. My airline is a large carrier member of the foundation. I am personally a member of the foundation. I recommend all of you, if you're safety professionals in your organization, you need to be a member of this organization. You get a copy of this mailed to you every month or so, and it's really good value. The best safety information in our industry is contained in this journal. Susan's out there, go up and sign up. Thank you and have a great info share.